My husband and his brothers thought it was funny to prank me. They left me stranded 300 miles from home, laughing as they drove off yelling, "Good luck." I never went back. 5 years later, he found me and his smile vanished when he saw who stood behind. Ooh, Part 2. When I stepped off the bus the next morning, the air smelled like salt water and pine trees. Aunt May was waiting in an old blue pickup. She looked older than I remembered, but her hug felt the same. She didn't ask me what happened, she just said, "Let's get you inside." For the first time in years, I felt like someone was on my side. Like I didn't have to prove anything. I didn't have to explain why I was tired or hurt or scared. I just had to be. I took a long shower that night, scrubbing off the dust, the tears, the years of pretending. And I promised myself something as I wrapped up in a towel, and looked at my reflection in Aunt May's mirror. "You're not going back, Lena. Not ever again." Aunt May's home sat on a quiet street with chipped picket fences and flower beds that looked like they belonged in an old movie. Her house smelled like lemon polish and fresh bread. Every corner felt warm, lived in, safe. I slept for 2 days straight after I arrived. I didn't even realize how tired I'd been. Not just from the trip, but from the years before it. The constant tension, the faked smiles, the never-ending effort to keep peace. My body had finally stopped bracing for the next blow. When I woke up, Aunt May was sitting at the kitchen table knitting like no time had passed. She slid a plate of eggs and toast in front of me, then handed me an envelope. Inside was a small pile of cash and a folded piece of paper with a name written on it. "Lena Morgan, my friend at the diner can use help," she said softly. "They don't ask a lot of questions. Just tell them that's your name." I stared at the paper. My heart beat a little faster. Morgan was my mother's maiden name. I hadn't heard it in years, but it fit. It felt like putting on a coat that had been hanging in the back of a closet. Familiar, warm, mine. I started working at the diner that week. It was a small place near the water with sticky menus and faded booths, but the customers were kind, and the owner, Mrs. Carter, paid me cash at the end of each shift. I worked mornings mostly, poured coffee, took orders, wiped tables. It wasn't glamorous, but it gave me purpose, and it gave me time to think. At night, I'd sit on the back porch with Aunt May, sipping sweet tea and watching the sun dip into the ocean. She never pushed me to talk, just sat with me, quietly knitting, or humming old tunes from the radio. Sometimes I thought about Kyle, not with longing, more like confusion. How had I let myself stay so long in something that chipped away at me piece by piece? I hadn't just lost myself in that marriage, I had handed myself over. But here, I was getting bits of me back. A few weeks into my new job, everything changed again. It was a slow Tuesday afternoon. The diner was quiet. I was refilling the napkin holders when I heard the bell above the door jingle. A man stumbled in, tall, rough around the edges, soaked in blood. At first, I thought it was a prank. My whole body tensed, but then I saw his eyes wild, pained, real. "Help," he said before collapsing near the counter. Time froze. Then my instincts kicked in. I rushed over, checked his pulse, grabbed a towel, and pressed it against the bleeding on his side. Mrs. Carter called 911 while I stayed with him, whispering, "You're going to be okay, just hold on." The ambulance came fast. They worked on him right there on the diner floor. Before they wheeled him out, he grabbed my wrist and looked straight into my eyes. "Thank you," he said, his voice raspy. His name was Grant. That's all I knew. I didn't think I'd see him again, but a few days later, he came back limping, bruised, but standing. He asked for coffee, then he asked for my name. "Lena," I said. Cautiously. He smiled. "Thank you for saving my life, Lena." He came in every few days after that, always sat at the same booth near the window. Sometimes he'd read the newspaper. Sometimes he'd just sit and stare out at the ocean. He didn't talk much at first, but when he did, he was different from the men I'd known. He didn't interrupt. He didn't joke at my expense. He didn't need to be the center of attention. He listened. It felt strange, new. I didn't know who he really was or what had happened to him, but one thing was clear. He was running from something too. Maybe that's why I didn't feel so alone anymore. By the time autumn rolled in, Grant had become a regular part of my world. He never said much about his past, and I never asked. It felt like we had an unspoken agreement. I wouldn't ask where he came from, and he wouldn't ask who I used to be. We just existed in the now. Quiet mornings, coffee refills, soft glances that lingered just a little too long. Still, there were moments I caught him staring out the window with a look that made my chest tighten, like he was remembering something painful, like he was preparing for it to come back. One evening, a storm rolled in, thick gray clouds, sheets of rain. The diner closed early, and I walked home with my coat pulled tight. When I reached Aunt May's porch, I saw a figure sitting on the steps. It was Grant. He was drenched. His hair clung to his forehead, his hands were buried in his jacket pockets. When he looked up at me, I saw something raw in his eyes. I didn't know where else to go, he said. I nodded and opened the door. Aunt May wasn't home. She'd gone to her church group. Wouldn't be back until morning. "Come inside." He hesitated for a second, then followed. I gave him a towel and made some tea. We sat at the kitchen table while the storm rattled the windows. For a while, we just listened to the rain. Then he spoke. "I used to be a detective," he said, his voice low. "Big city. Narcotics division got too close to something I wasn't supposed to. My partner was on the payroll, dirty, set me up, Got me shot, left me for dead. I stared at him, not sure what to say. They covered it up, he continued, said it was a drug deal gone wrong. I knew better, I survived. But I lost everything, my badge, my apartment, my name. He looked up at me like he was waiting to see if I'd run. I didn't, instead I said, sounds like you needed to get away. He nodded. Yeah, just wanted. Somewhere quiet, somewhere no one would find me. We didn't talk after that, we just sat there drinking tea while the storm howled outside. That night, he slept on the couch. I brought him a blanket and pillow. When I turned to leave, he gently touched my hand. Thank you, Lena, for everything. I went to bed with my heart beating too fast. The next few weeks, Grant kept coming by, not just to the diner, but to the house. He'd help Aunt May fix the porch railing, carry groceries, sweep fallen leaves. He never made it feel like a favor, he just showed up. Every time I turned around, he was there, quiet, steady, present, and then things started to shift. One afternoon, I came home to find the front door wide open. My chest tightened. Aunt May was out. I stepped inside slowly. The living room looked untouched. But in the kitchen, one of the drawers was open. The one where Aunt May kept her spare cash. Nothing else seemed missing. But I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been there. I called Grant. He was there in minutes. He checked the locks, walked the property. Asked if anyone had seen anything suspicious. I could tell something about it rattled him more than it rattled me. This isn't random, he muttered. Someone's watching me? I asked. He didn't answer. After that, Grant started staying closer. He put new locks on the doors, installed a small camera over the porch. He even brought a flashlight and kept it by the side table near the door. He was always calm, but I could tell his mind was racing. At night, I started sleeping with the light on. Aunt May didn't say much, but one evening while folding laundry, she looked at me and said, sometimes the people we run from don't chase us because they want us back. They chase us because they lost control. I didn't respond, but I felt her words settle into my bones. Somewhere far away, Kyle still existed, his brothers too. They were out there living their lives, probably laughing about the day they left me behind. But something had shifted. I wasn't scared of them anymore. I was scared of what they'd do if they realized I wasn't scared. It had been nearly 5 years since I heard his voice. But the moment I opened that door and saw Kyle standing there, it was like time folded in on itself. My hands went numb, my breath caught in my throat. For a second, I thought I was imagining things. He looked older, leaner. His hair was longer, a little messy, there were dark circles under his eyes, and he held his hands up slowly like he didn't want to scare me. Lena, he said softly, please, can we talk? I didn't answer, I didn't move. How did he find me? My mind raced, trying to figure it out. I hadn't used my real name, I didn't post anything, I had been careful. Then I heard footsteps behind me. Grant. He came up beside me and stood between Kyle and me in one smooth, quiet motion. Who are you? Grant asked, firm but calm. Kyle blinked at him, clearly caught off guard. I'm her husband. Those words hit me like a slap. Husband. As if that still meant something. As if 5 years of silence didn't happen. As if he hadn't left me in the middle of nowhere for a laugh. I stepped out from behind Grant, my voice steady. I'm not your wife. Kyle's eyes darted between us. Lena, please just give me 5 minutes. I looked at Grant. He didn't say anything, just gave me a slight nod. I stepped outside and closed the door behind me, leaving Grant inside. We stood on the porch. The wind carried the smell of sea salt and rain-soaked leaves. Kyle shoved his hands in his jacket pockets and stared at the ground for a long time before speaking.